The cafe was almost full that morning, the kind of gentle chaos that hums with life. Coffee cups clinking, soft laughter, and the distant rhythm of rain tapping against the wide windows. Amid the warmth and chatter, a young waitress named Elena moved quietly from table to table. Her smile was polite, her movements graceful, but her eyes, those soft, tired eyes, carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. She worked as if each motion was holding something together, as if every wiped table or poured cup of coffee kept her from falling apart completely. That's when it happened. As she bent slightly to clean a table where a man and his small son had just finished eating, her hand trembled. The cloth moved slowly, her breath uneven. The boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, looked at her with innocent curiosity and tugged at his father's sleeve. "Daddy," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "She has tears in her eyes." The man turned his head, his brow furrowed in gentle concern. But by then, Elena had straightened up and forced a small smile, quickly turning away. The boy's words lingered in the air, a fragile truth that made even the hum of the cafe fall still for a moment. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need it today, and subscribe to our channel. Because sometimes, a simple story can remind us how much one small act of empathy can mean. Elena had started working at the cafe 2 years earlier, after her husband passed away in a car accident that left her not only widowed, but also drowning in hospital bills and a quiet, unrelenting grief. Before that, she'd been a preschool teacher, someone who used to smile freely, who loved mornings and laughter. But after the accident, life had turned into survival. She took the cafe job because it was close to the small apartment she could barely afford, and because the owner, a kind older woman, named Mrs. Carter, didn't ask too many questions. Every morning, Elena arrived before sunrise, tying her hair back neatly, buttoning up her black apron, and preparing to serve people who had no idea how much she was holding inside. To them, she was just another waitress, smiling and polite. But behind that calm exterior were unpaid bills, eviction notices, and the memory of a man she'd loved more than anything. That morning, something inside her was heavier than usual. Her landlord had given her one final warning the night before. She had 5 days to pay the overdue rent, or she'd have to leave. Her car had stopped working weeks ago, and she'd been walking to work in the cold. And worst of all, that day marked 2 years exactly since the accident. She had told no one, not even Mrs. Carter, but her heart was aching like a wound that never healed. She was cleaning the table slowly, lost in thought, when the little boy's innocent words pierced through her defenses. She has tears in her eyes. She hadn't even realized one had escaped down her cheek. The man, noticing her trembling hand, gave her a kind smile and quietly left a tip that was much larger than usual before taking his son's hand and leaving. She thanked him softly and tried to shake off the embarrassment, but her heart was pounding. The day passed slowly after that. She worked through the pain in her feet and the ache in her back, always moving, always serving. The laughter of other customers, the smell of fresh coffee, the clinking of dishes, it all blurred into a distant hum as her mind replayed memories she tried to forget. When the sun dipped below the skyline and the cafe emptied, Elena stayed behind, wiping tables even after Mrs. Carter had told her she could go home. She didn't want to go home. There was nothing waiting for her there except silence. That was when the door opened again. The same man and his son from earlier walked in, their coats damp from the light drizzle outside. The cafe was technically closed, but Elena smiled gently and said, "I'm sorry, we're closed for the night." The man hesitated, then spoke in a soft, respectful voice. "I know, but my son really wanted to say something." The boy held a small, slightly crumpled napkin in his hand. He looked nervous but determined, stepping forward and offering it to her. "This is for you," he said. "Daddy says sometimes people need hugs, but if you can't give one, you can give a note instead." Elena took the napkin gently, unfolding it to find a small, uneven drawing of a smiling sun and 3 stick figures holding hands. Underneath, written in the shaky handwriting of a child, were the words, "Don't cry, you are loved." Her throat tightened as she knelt down, tears spilling freely now. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. The boy smiled proudly, and his father placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. The man hesitated again, as if wanting to say more, then reached into his pocket and placed an envelope on the counter. "You dropped this earlier," he said softly, though Elena knew she hadn't. Before she could respond, he gave a polite nod and walked out with his son, disappearing into the quiet night. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the envelope. When she finally opened it, her knees almost gave out. Inside were a few $100 bills and a note that read, "For whatever made you cry today, I hope tomorrow is kinder." That night, Elena sat at one of the corner tables long after everyone else had left. The lights were dim, the city outside hushed, and the only sound was the faint ticking of the clock above the counter. She looked around at the café, the same walls she'd seen every day for 2 years, and realized that somehow, in the middle of her pain, kindness had found her. She didn't know the man's name, but his act had lit a small spark inside her, one she hadn't felt in years. For the first time since the accident, she allowed herself to hope. She used part of the money to pay her rent and the rest to buy groceries and repair her shoes. But something deeper had changed too. Over the following weeks, Elena began to talk more with the customers, to laugh softly again, to notice the world around her. She began volunteering on her days off at a local shelter, helping serve meals to families in need. "It feels good to give," she would tell Mrs. Carter, who smiled knowingly. Then, one rainy afternoon a few months later, she saw the man and his son again. They walked in, shaking off umbrellas, and when their eyes met, she felt a warmth spread through her chest. She walked over, smiling genuinely this time, and took their order. The boy beamed. "Hey, you look happy today," he said brightly. She laughed softly. "I am," she said, and she meant it. As they finished their meal, the boy showed her another drawing, this time of a cafe with a smiling waitress and a rainbow overhead. "It's you," he said proudly. "Daddy says rainbows come after sad days." When they left, Elena tucked the drawing into her apron pocket and felt something shift inside her. It wasn't just gratitude anymore, it was purpose. She decided to go back to school part-time to become a counselor for children who had lost parents, just like she'd lost her husband. She wanted to help others find the light she thought she'd lost forever. A year later, Elena stood behind the counter of the cafe, now co-managing it with Mrs. Carter, who was preparing to retire. The cafe had grown busier, warmer, decorated with plants, paintings, and laughter that seemed to fill every corner. On one wall, there was a framed drawing of a sun and 3 stick figures holding hands. One evening, as the cafe was closing, Elena noticed a familiar figure walk in, the man from that rainy morning. This time, he was alone. He smiled, placing his coat over a chair. "I never got to thank you," she said quietly as she poured him a cup of coffee. "You already did," he replied with a kind smile. "You found your smile." Again, they talked for hours after closing, sharing stories of loss, resilience, and small miracles. It turned out he was a social worker, widowed as well, raising his son alone. The more they spoke, the more they realized how much they understood each other, not just in words but in silence too. When the clock struck midnight, Elena finally sat down across from him, her apron folded neatly on the table beside her. For the first time in years, she wasn't the woman cleaning tables or holding back tears. She was simply Elena, a woman rediscovering life one gentle moment at a time. Months passed, and the cafe became something more than just a place for coffee and pastries. It became a haven for people seeking warmth and connection. Elena often told new staff members that kindness was their most important ingredient. "You never know," she would say, "what someone carries behind their smile." The little boy, now taller and brimming with confidence, visited often, proudly calling Elena Aunt Ellie. And though she never forgot the pain she once carried, it no longer defined her. It had become part of the story she told others, one of healing, love, and unexpected kindness. And on quiet nights, when she wiped down the last table and locked the cafe doors, she sometimes looked out at the rain and smiled. because somewhere in the rhythm of falling drops, she could still hear a small boy's voice saying, "She has tears in her eyes, and remember how those tears became the start of something beautiful." If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Every story we share reminds us that there's still kindness in the world, and sometimes all it takes is one gentle act to change a life. Special request, in the comments, write "Kindness can save a soul" if you believe the smallest gestures can make the biggest difference.